Hello, everyone. If you can hear me, we're going to get started in just a few minutes. We'll wait for a few more people to come on, and then we'll be ready to go. All right, everyone, it's noon, so I guess we're going to go ahead and get started today. My name is Kelly Handy, and I'm one of the IRB specialists here at UTA. I'm going to be presenting today along with my colleague, Angie Luna. So let me go ahead and share my screen. All righty. Can you go ahead and can everybody see that? All righty. So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining today's session. In this presentation, we are going to provide a comprehensive walkthrough of the IRB process here at UTA. We will begin with an overview of our IRB webpage, which serves as a central resource for researchers. And it includes detailed guidance, downloadable forms and templates, and step-by-step instructions for submitting an IRB application. Following that, we will guide you through the IRB application itself, section by section, explaining the specific information required in each part to ensure clarity and compliance. And to finish off, we will give you a brief overview of the IRB review process and address some of the frequently asked questions about topics such as survey platforms, subject pools, multi-site research and reliance, and personnel changes. So just a little introduction of our team. Our executive director is Kirsten Morningstar. Our director is Lisa Greening. Along with myself, there are two other specialists, Lisa Alvarez and Angie Luna, and our awesome office coordinator, Amy Keller. You can reach us anytime, either by emailing us directly, by phone, or through our general regulatory services at uta.edu email. And we're always here for any questions or support that you might need. So on this page, you will find the primary link to our IRB homepage, which offers comprehensive guidance to assist researchers in navigating the IRB process and understanding the IRB requirements. So the main webpage includes a link to Mentis, which is our online submission system. Additionally, you will find our IRB standard operating procedures, along with relevant institutional policies and federal regulations. There is also a decision, sorry about that. There's also a decision table to help determine whether your study requires IRB approval. Beyond that, the site provides step-by-step instructions for submitting a protocol, a complete library of IRB forms and templates, and guidance for modifying or closing a protocol. Resources addressing multi-site research and other specialized topics are also available on this webpage. So on our webpage, you'll find a project comparison chart designed to assist researchers in determining whether their project requires IRB approval. This chart outlines key characteristics of various project types and examines factors such as intent of the study, the subject population, anticipated benefits, and the planned dissemination of results. So while this chart provides helpful guidance, we recognize that some projects kind of fall into gray areas. So if after reviewing the chart, you are uncertain about whether IRB approval would be necessary for your project, we strongly encourage you to contact our team for clarification and support. Additionally, as part of our guidance, a link to the Principal Investigator Responsibility page is provided. Principal investigators must be current UTA faculty, staff, or students, and they are accountable for the ethical conduct of research involving human subjects. So this includes obtaining IRB approval prior to initiating research, ensuring that all personnel listed are qualified and adequately trained, maintaining strict protocol compliance, securing informed consent from participants, and promptly reporting any issues or modifications to the IRB. Faculty advisor responsibilities can also be found as part of our guidance page. So UTA's IRB permits students to serve as principal investigators for human subject research, but they must have a qualified faculty advisor who oversees the project. The faculty advisor is responsible for ensuring the quality and timely submission of the IRB protocol, for monitoring the research conduct, and supporting the PI as needed, for ensuring compliance and data quality, and for ensuring that records are securely maintained throughout the required retention period. Our guidance page also features a comprehensive step-by-step instructions for submitting an IRB protocol. This resource walks you through each stage of the process, from determining the training requirements for you and your team, to identifying the correct forms, and navigating how to initiate a submission in Mentis. To keep all researchers informed, the current number of protocols awaiting review in our IRB queue is posted at the top of the instruction page, and this number is updated weekly, usually on Monday mornings. When this number exceeds 50, we designate it as a high volume period. So during these times, review times may extend up to 2 months. All submissions that are received are reviewed on a first-come, first-served basis, and this includes both initial submissions as well as modifications. So we strongly encourage all researchers to monitor this queue and plan their submissions accordingly to accommodate their research timelines. Our IRB forms and templates page, you'll find downloadable templates for our protocol application forms, as well as essential documents such as informed consent forms and a form for waiver of consent or written documentation for consent. The page also provides our non-UTA collaborator form and supplemental forms tailored to studies involving medical devices or vulnerable populations. By using these standardized templates, researchers can streamline their submissions, minimize errors, and maintain compliance with both institutional and federal regulations. When you begin preparing your IRB protocol, know that there are 2 main protocol application options. One for primary research, where you directly collect data from participants, and one for secondary research, which involves the use or analysis of existing data. Each application provides a detailed section-by-section guide to ensure your submission is thorough and accurate. As you work through the application, you'll find specific instructions designed to clarify each requirement and support you in compiling all necessary information. So momentarily, we're going to walk you through the most commonly used application, which is our primary research application. But before diving into the protocol application itself, let me briefly outline what you'll need to prepare and submit using the Mentis platform. So when you log in, the main homepage features an IRB option on the left sidebar. By clicking here, you'll find choices for either launching a new protocol or modifying an existing one. So to start a new protocol, you would select submit a new protocol. Additionally, on this homepage, you'll find a training section on the left sidebar. And this is where you'll access and complete your human subject protection training, as well as any other training that may be required for your study, such as conflict of interest training or responsible conduct of research training. Ensuring these trainings are completed prior to beginning your application will streamline the submission process and help you to meet compliance requirements. So this is an example of a Mentis protocol submission. So you'll see at the top, you have their protocol number. Under this will be your study title. There's a box that contains your protocol status, your review type, so whether it's minimal risk, exempt, expedited, full board, and also, information about your project, whether it's federally funded, FDA regulated, a clinical trial, et cetera. So the main information will be at the top of the page. And then section 1 of the submission is dedicated to protocol personnel. So here you'll provide a list of all individuals who are affiliated with UTA, who will be actively engaged in your study, and you'll specify their role in the study. And then you'll be able to click on this training information to see the details of whether or not those individuals have completed the required training. Section 2 of the Mentis protocol focuses on gathering the essential details about your study. So here you will enter your protocol title and provide a brief summary of your research. And section 3, you'll find direct links to all of our necessary forms and templates. So this is just another access point for those forms that are included on our website. For section 4, this is where you will upload all study-related materials for IRB review. So this includes your completed protocol application, informed consent documents, recruitment materials, site permission letters, any applicable supplemental forms, as well as any data collection instruments like survey questions or interview guides. Ensuring all of these documents are uploaded and properly labeled will facilitate an efficient review and help prevent delays in your study approval process. And then finally, at the bottom, there's a spot for comments in case you want to leave comments for either your research team or for the IRB. So now we're going to go ahead and walk through the protocol application section by section. And when completing the application, be sure to read the guidance instructions carefully and be sure to answer all questions completely and thoroughly. So section 1 is specifically dedicated to non-UTA personnel. So those individuals who will be directly engaged in your research, but who are not affiliated with UTA. So this includes anyone who will interact with human subjects or will have access to identifiable data in your study. For every person that you list in this section, a non-UTA collaborator form must be completed and submitted alongside proof of human subject protection training that was completed within the last 3 years. So depending on your study, additional training documentation may also be required. If any non-UTA personnel are affiliated with another university, at that point, our IRB office will reach out to their IRB to initiate reliance proceedings. Section 2 prompts you to provide the anticipated start and end dates for your project. So these don't have to be exact dates, they can just be estimates. And this helps the IRB to understand the research timeline and overall scope of the research. So when you reach section 3 of the of the protocol application, it's essential to provide a clear description of your funding source so that the IRB can ensure that appropriate regulations and oversight are applied to your study. If your study is supported by a sponsored project, make sure to identify the sponsor and include the Mentis Blue Sheet number. If your funding comes from another source, such as department account, personal funds, or external foundation, make sure to specify the source in detail. So if you intend to offer participants any form of compensation, you must indicate which funding source will be used for those payments. Section 4 requires you to classify the risk of your research. So minimal risk means that the likelihood and degree of harm or discomfort anticipated in your study are not greater than those ordinarily encountered in daily life or during routine physical or psychological examinations. Ensuring confidentiality is a key component of this classification. If your project involves procedures or interventions that surpass this threshold, potentially exposing subjects to greater physical, psychological, social, or legal risks, then your study would be considered greater than minimal risk. In section 5, you must demonstrate how your project qualifies as human subject research. So this involves laying out the primary research questions, hypotheses, and objectives that direct your research. So clearly illustrating the focus and scope of your study helps the IRB evaluate the ethical considerations, scientific merit, and relevance of your proposed research. Section 6 is dedicated to outlining your study procedures in full detail. So here you will provide a comprehensive overview of your research process, including the types of data you intend to collect, and specify exactly when, where, and how each data point will be gathered. So you should describe the methodologies and platforms utilized for both data collection and analysis, noting whether any sessions will be audio or video recorded, and if so, how this will be done. So this section kind of serves as like the narrative of your project. And we encourage researchers when looking at their overall study design to consider the expectations of their academic peers and target journals. By anticipating data requirements early in the planning phase, researchers can better align their methodologies and publication standards to reduce the need for major revisions or study modifications in the future. Section 7 focuses on the duration of participation. So here you must clarify how many sessions each participant will attend, the length of each session, and the total commitment required. So this information should align precisely with what you've outlined in your informed consent document and all recruitment materials. Section 8 addresses alternative options for participation. So here you must specify whether any alternatives exist for individuals who opt not to participate in your research. In many minimal risk studies, there are no alternatives, in which case this should be clearly stated. However, if you are offering any type of course credit or extra credit for student participation, you are required to provide an alternative assignment for those students who decline, and the specifics of that option must be outlined in this section. Section 9 covers locations and research sites. So clearly indicate the physical spaces where your study will occur. So addresses, buildings, room numbers. For online research, make sure to list all websites and platforms utilized for data collection or interaction. If portions of your research take place at institutions or locations that are outside of UTA, that place should be listed, and a site permission letter should be obtained and uploaded into Mentis along with your submission. Section 10 details the qualifications of all protocol personnel. So for everyone listed, both UTA and non-UTA collaborators, you must document specific roles and explain how each person is equipped to participate in the research beyond simply completing human subject protection training. So highlight any specialized training, relevant experience, or expertise that demonstrates their suitability or their suitability for the project. Section 11 pertains to study oversight. So in this section, you must outline how principal investigator will ensure the ethical conduct of the research and the protection of human subjects. So this includes a plan for regular communication and supervision of the research team, detailing how protocol adherence will be monitored and how updates or issues will be addressed. If the PI is a student, you must explain how the faculty advisor's responsibilities are being fulfilled, ensuring proper mentorship and oversight throughout all phases of the study. Section 12 focuses on identifying the target study population. So here you'll describe the group or groups that you intend to enroll and include information about age, gender, health status, or other relevant characteristics. Be aware that if your research involves vulnerable populations, such as pregnant women, prisoners, children, or those with impaired decision-making capacity, you are required to complete additional forms that are provided on our webpage to address specific regulatory protections. Section 13 details your study's inclusion criteria. So here you will list each condition that defines who can participate in your research and the methods that you will use to determine eligibility. So whether you might utilize pre-screening assessments or allow subjects to self-identify and enroll based on set criteria. And section 14 addresses study exclusion criteria. So here you'll just specify factors or conditions that will disqualify individuals from participating, even if they would otherwise meet the inclusion criteria. Section 15 requires you to specify the anticipated number of subjects you plan to enroll in your study. So for minimal risk studies, an approximate figure or range is sufficient. So you don't have to tell us the exact number of subjects. A range or an estimate is sufficient for minimal risk studies. This just kind of helps the IRB gauge the size and the scope of your research. However, if your study is classified as greater than minimal risk, enrollment must not exceed the number approved in your application. Section 16 is dedicated to outlining your recruitment strategies. So here you must describe every method and source used to identify and contact potential subjects. So consider how you will locate participants and how you will obtain their contact information. If you plan to use private data to identify or reach out to potential subjects, a permission letter or email from the providing individual or organization must be included in your Mentis submission. Section 16A focuses on recruitment language and materials. So rather than indicating the language that will be used on those recruitment materials, you are required to provide the exact text or script you will use for recruitment efforts. So if you prefer, or if you have several different recruitment approaches, you may upload all of the recruitment materials directly to your submission in Mentis versus listing them here in this section. So this includes email templates, social media posts, scripts for in-person or phone recruitment, posts for subject pools such as SONA and Prolific, and the actual flyers to be distributed. So at this point, I'm actually going to turn it over to my colleague, Angie, and she is going to walk you through the rest of the protocol application. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and turn it over to her.
Hello, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Hopefully, okay. Okay, I'm going to go over the rest of the application. So number 17 is about the informed consent process. And the informed consent process is one of the most important parts of the research study. It's important that subjects are provided with sufficient information to understand the requirements of their participation and how their data is going to be collected and used. It's also important to note that you cannot obtain information about a person through another individual, such as from a family member or a friend, unless that person has also undergone the informed consent process themselves. So in this section, you'll want to describe all elements of the process, when it's going to happen, where, and how subjects will be providing their consent. If you're conducting a survey where subjects are just hitting "I agree," then this would require a waiver of the written consent documentation requirement. So in 17A, we want justification for why you are requesting to waive this requirement. If your study is federally funded or FDA regulated, you'll also need to attach the Form 3, which is the waiver of written consent documentation. That form is also used if you're intending to waive portions or elements of the consent process. So this is a copy of our minimal risk consent form template. And as you can see, we've included a lot of prompts in red text. And this is intended to assist you with providing all of the required details for this document. You'll simply need to plug the information in from the application right into the consent form. Please be sure that any details you are providing in your consent form are consistent with the details that you have provided in your application. One of the most common return comments for consent forms tends to be that the study title is different or the eligibility criteria is too brief. We've even seen different compensation types and amounts between the consent form and the application. So double check that everything is consistent before you submit it for review. It should also be noted that when you submit the document to us, all of the prompt language or red text should be removed. So our office needs to see the document exactly how it's going to be issued to participating subjects. This includes the way that you intend to document the subject's consent. If the consent form requires a handwritten signature, we will stamp the most recent version of the consent form with the approval date and the version number. If the consent form doesn't require a signature or if it's going to be embedded in a survey, we typically do not stamp the consent form. Incomplete disclosure occurs when an investigator withholds information about the specific purpose, nature, or other aspect of the research. Deception occurs when an investigator gives false information to subjects or intentionally misleads them about some key aspect of the research. If you plan to utilize this in your study, you will need to provide your reasoning and whether subjects will be debriefed at the end of the study. This should also include the language or the statement that's going to be used to debrief subjects at the end of the study. For the compensation section, please describe all details. This should include how much subjects are going to receive, and whether you plan to prorate it for partial participation. We should know when the compensation is going to be issued to subjects and how, whether they're going to be receiving it in person, in cash, or whether they're going to receive a gift card through an email. For all methods, it should be described how it's going to be documented and how you intend to maintain confidentiality. If you are planning to utilize a raffle, it should be clarified how this will be conducted and then how the winners will be notified. If the compensation amount for participating subject groups will differ in any way, you should provide justification or reasoning for this. It should also be noted that if a subject doesn't answer all questions in a survey or if they leave early, will they still qualify to receive all compensation? All of these details should be considered and described in both the application and the consent form. Compensation tends to be our number one reason that our office receives complaints. So being as thorough as possible in the application and the consent form hopefully will resolve any complaints or issues. This section is intended to describe the risks and the benefits. So in the risks section, you'll want to detail any actual or potential risks that the subjects will encounter while participating in your study. And then in number 22, how you intend to minimize those risks. So for instance, if there's physical risks such as falling or muscle soreness, what are your strategies to prevent that? For any psychological risks, we have this UTA mental health resources that's listed on or available on our website. And this is a great resource to utilize for any psychological risks that may occur in your study. You can share this with them. In number 23, you'll want to describe whether your study will involve any blood draws, any radiation or x-rays, or any devices that use lasers. And this would require EH&S approval. So we'll definitely need to involve them, and additional training may be required. For the benefits, what are the expected or potential benefits of the study? Does it directly benefit the subject? What are the expected and potential benefits of the study to the field or society at large? Both of these should be mentioned in detail. Be sure to address all aspects of subject privacy and confidentiality. So privacy refers to a subject's right to control access to themselves. So in other words, how will you conduct your study procedures to ensure that the subject can maintain as much privacy while participating as they feel comfortable? If you are conducting an interview, are you ensuring that it is in a private place or controlling the environment in a way to prevent any situation where they might be exposed as a research subject or embarrassed? Confidentiality, on the other hand, is the researcher's responsibility in protecting subject data and ensuring that it is not disclosed without their permission. So in this section of the application, we want to know what type of data your study will contain. For instance, is it going to collect names and recordings that would directly identify them? Will you collect identifiable data but later replace it with a coding mechanism to further protect against data breaches or exposing someone as a research subject? Will the subject be utilizing a pseudonym while participating that de-identifies the data from the research team, but is still linked to that participating subject across all procedures? Or will you be conducting a survey that collects no identifiers at all, and there is no way to know who is participating in the study? In this section, the data security section, we want to know where you intend to keep your data and how you intend to secure it for the full data retention period. If you have paper documentation, where will this be stored and who will be responsible for it? If you have electronic data, what platform are you going to be using to store this for the full data retention period? Data can only be maintained on UTA-sanctioned encrypted devices or software, and all records must be maintained and kept secure for at least 3 years from the day that the study is closed in Mentis, or in accordance with the funding agency requirements if this is longer. For students that will graduate or leave UTA before this retention period ends, this section should also describe their long-term storage arrangements. So typically this is given to the faculty advisor. In number 26C, you'll describe if there's any legal limits to confidentiality. So if any part of the study could result in the potential identification of child abuse, elderly abuse, communicable diseases, or criminal activities that would or could not have been otherwise identified, and explain your plan of action if this happens. And number 27 for data sharing, if you intend to share, release, or present any identifiable subject data from the study, we need to know where, when, and to whom. And all of the details that you provide in this section should also be included in the consent form, so subjects are also aware of how their data is being shared. For the conflicts of interest section, does the PI or the protocol personnel have any affiliation, arrangement, or financial interest that could be perceived as a conflict of interest? And all personnel listed on a sponsored project or who will be engaged in greater than minimal risk research will be required to fill out a COI disclosure annually. And this last section is kind of a reminder to attach any additional documents for review. So if you are conducting a survey or a questionnaire, we need to see that. If you are going to have an interview or focus group sessions, we need to know the questions or the prompts that are going to be used. We need to see all the recruitment materials. This includes flyers, ads, scripts, any emails that are going to be sent, or any posts that are going to be shared on social media. And this should also be noted for subject pools like MTurk or SONA. We need to know the recruitment language that's going to be used in those platforms as well. So how is it going to be advertised to students or people on the platform? What language is going to be used? And what is the criteria for selecting subjects? And remember to use spell check on all documents. We see this very often. We sometimes have it, if it's subject facing, we'll have to return it. And it could be as minor as just misspelling a word, but be sure to use spell check before you submit it for review. This is our device form. If your study is going to be utilizing any medical devices or any devices that would be categorized as a medical device, you're required to attach this form and required to let us know whether you plan to test the safety or effectiveness of it. And we need to know the current FDA status of the device. With any device or medical device that you intend to utilize in the study, be sure to upload manuals for all of them. Even if the device wouldn't be considered a medical device, we're still going to ask for the manuals. So if you plan to use any device in your study, definitely upload your manual because we're probably going to ask for it. This is our IRB review process. We have a copy of this flow chart on our website. Briefly go over it a little bit. So first we assess the risk level. So is it going to be minimal risk? Is it greater than minimal risk? Or is this a reliance protocol? After that, we're going to check to see if the study has any federal funding or if it's going to involve any FDA regulated devices or drugs. These factors are going to determine whether or not the IRB specialist can review and approve it through exempt or minimal risk review procedures, whether it's going to go expedited, which means that after the IRB coordinators review and get it ready for approval, one of the IRB members is going to have to review and finalize the approval, or is it going to have to go full board to a convened IRB meeting? And our IRB meetings take place every second Tuesday of the month. If your protocol will go full board, we will let you know so that you can prepare to get it submitted in time for the earliest meeting possible. So what does the IRB consider in their review when looking at your application? We're going to make sure that all of the risks are minimized to the fullest extent possible, and whether the benefits that are listed justify exposing the participants to the listed risks. We need to see all of the procedures and ensure that they are clearly detailed in both the application and the consent form, and that all aspects of the logistics have been considered. We need to see that your compensation is reasonable and fair for all participants. If it's different, why, how you're planning on doing it, and when. If the data is going to be stored securely, and if every effort is being made to maintain the privacy and confidentiality of the subjects. So during the review, the IRB specialists are going to review it and then probably return it for revisions and clarifications in Mentis. And when this happens, Mentis does let you know by sending you an email to let you know that comments have been uploaded and that it's returned in your inbox. Once you address all of those edits, you'll return it back to the coordinators and we'll review the resubmissions and get it ready for either as approval or moving it to the next step in the review process. For students, this process is a little different. So students are not able to submit it directly to the IRB coordinators. They're actually going to have to submit it to their faculty advisor, who is going to do a preliminary review of the initial submission as well as the resubmission to ensure that everything has been addressed, is consistent and complete before it gets submitted to us. So once you receive approval, it's not completely done. It's possible that you might have changes or situations that would require a modification to the originally approved protocol. So if any changes need to be made, for instance, to survey questions, to adding a new survey or adding interview questions or any small or large change, you will have to submit a modification before that can be implemented. Failure to obtain IRB approval for any changes, small or large, will result in noncompliance. Also, some studies require continuing review. This happens annually, at least annually. But the IRB is going to review the amount of subjects that have been enrolled, how many have withdrawn from the study and why. And this is also an opportunity for the PI to report any non-unanticipated problems or non-serious adverse events. Any unanticipated problems or serious adverse events should be promptly reported to our office through email. At the very end of your study, the PI is going to want to close the protocol. So if you are completely done with recruitment, everyone's been enrolled, you've finished subject follow-up, you've done a data analysis of all the identifiable data, and all you are doing is maintaining the identifiable data for the record retention period. Then you either submit a protocol modification to request that your study be closed in Mintis, or you can send an email to us at regulatoryservices@uta.edu and request for your study to be closed. So some of the frequently asked questions that we get, AI and research. So AI can be a great tool while conducting research projects, from efficiency, productivity, to graphics, to data or statistical analysis. It's a great tool, and we don't necessarily have any restrictions for how it can be used, but there is the possibility of unintended negative consequences, and these must be considered. At the federal, state, and even institutional levels, many policies and regulations are being considered, and UTA has posted guidance for researchers that puts all of the known requirements for AI use in research, as well as some safeguards that should be considered when using it in your study to ensure that use of AI is ethical and appropriate. For survey platforms, we also wanted to touch on this a little bit. So we get a lot of studies that want to use RedCap, SurveyMonkey, or Google Forms to conduct their surveys. If you plan to use any platform outside of Question Pro, an exception must be obtained from OIT, as well as a risk assessment for the platform from ISO. For the sake of time, as well as the protection of subject confidentiality, we highly recommend using Question Pro. But whatever platform you do intend to use, please be sure that you know all of the data security measures. What information about the subject is being shared with the research team, and what information do you have access to? Have you considered protection of this in your application, and are subjects being made aware of this? If you're intending to compensate subjects through the platform, how long does it take? And if there's issues with the subject receiving their compensation, how will that be handled? We have also experienced mention of bots taking surveys and requesting compensation. Do you have any measures in place to protect against this? And if so, what are your verification methods? Lastly, we've had questions about researchers using subject pools. I kind of touched on MTurk and SONA. Another perfectly acceptable recruitment strategy is recruiting subjects who have expressed interest in past research studies. So if you plan to utilize something like this, like through interest forms or through subjects that have expressed interest in, a consent form in a previous study that you conducted, we'll need to know the protocol number of the study, where the subjects indicated that they would be interested, or where exactly the interest form was posted, or where it is that, how you obtain their contact information. And then attach a copy of the consent form, or at least that language that was used to get their consent for contact. We would consider this data sharing, since email addresses are identifiable and are being maintained and utilized across studies. So if it involves two different protocols, be sure that you mention both protocol numbers, or that you mention it in both protocols. And you would need to mention how you intend to store and maintain the contact information across all studies. I'm going to briefly touch on collaborations and reliances. So the reliance process tends to be a little confusing to most researchers, and we highly recommend reaching out to our office if your study is going to involve multiple sites. Our office is going to need to know which site is going to conduct the IRB review and issue approval, or in other words, who is going to be serving as the reviewing IRB or the IRB of record. If our office is responsible for conducting the review, non-UTA collaborator forms should be attached to the submission that includes information about the collaborator's institution, their role in the study, and where each data collection procedure they are involved in is going to take place. They will also be required to provide confirmation that they've completed their HSP training at their institution. Once our office has all of this information, we will reach out to their institution on your behalf to initiate reliance procedures. This is basically just an agreement signed between institutions to agree on a single IRB being responsible for the review of the multi-site research. If our researchers are collaborating on projects outside of UTA that already have IRB approval or are going to seek IRB approval from the other institution, the UTA personnel that will be responsible for submitting a protocol to us in Mentis to inform us. In the submission, we need a copy of the IRB approval letter, a copy of the approved protocol, and some form of documentation that describes how the UTA personnel members will be engaged in the research. Once we receive this, our office will reach out on your behalf to initiate the reliance procedures, and in this situation, the reliance agreement would be signed between institutions for us to rely on the reviewing IRB's review. This procedure eliminates having two different IRBs conduct a review of the same study. While our office does this on your behalf, it is also important for the collaborators to communicate with their own IRBs to ensure that they are complying with all the requirements on their end. Lastly, we'll go over study oversight and personnel changes. So the PI is ultimately responsible for the design, conduct, and reporting of the research. It's their responsibility to ensure that subjects are being protected throughout all aspects of the research and that all policies and procedures are being followed. If the PI is a student, they must have a faculty advisor listed on their study who's also going to have oversight responsibilities to ensure that the student is conducting the study ethically and in accordance with the approved protocol. If at any time there's a need to change the study PI, the faculty advisor, or any protocol personnel member who has a specialized role in the project, then a modification is going to be required before that change can take place. If the PI or faculty advisor is being changed, we do require that a completed PI or FA change form be completed and attached to the protocol in Mentis. And this serves as documentation that all study data and appropriate documentation and permissions have been transferred from the previous PI or FA to the new PI or FA. If a specialized personnel member is being removed from the study, a modification may also be required. You'll be required to describe who will be taking their place and whether this is going to change the study procedures. Because if you are replacing the specially qualified personnel member was someone who has comparable qualifications or training, and there's going to be no changes to how the study procedures are going to be conducted, then no modification will be required. But if you are removing or adding somebody with a new specially qualified role, then you will need to submit a protocol modification to describe these changes. And that is the end of my section. And we left a little bit of time so that we can go over any questions from the audience. Does anybody have any questions that we didn't cover? You can, can you unmute yourself? Or you can put it in the chat. I don't know the settings on this.
I went ahead and changed it where they could unmute. And if you want to
Okay.
unmute and ask a question, yeah, feel free to do so.
All right, well, if nobody has any questions that you want to share with the group, feel free to reach out to us by email. No question is a dumb question. We're always glad to help. We definitely want to help before non-compliance or your submission gets lost in the queue. Feel free to reach out to us either directly or to the department. Thanks for attending.
Thank you. Oh, well, here we go. We have one question.
No, not really a question, but I said I'll reach out to you by mail. I have something very specific, so I'll mail it across. Thank you.
Great,
Okay.
sounds good. Thank you.
And we'll be posting this video on our YouTube channel.
Yeah, and will you also be emailing us this presentation?
Yes, we can do that.
Okay, that'll be great. Thank you.
Okay, for sure. I'm going to go ahead and end the event so we can close the recording.
Okay,
Sounds good.
yeah, probably smart. All right, thank you.